that because everybody was getting the 80s vibe a little, going back to the Thompson twins. But I couldn't resist with two doctors on the show today, PhDs, and we're going to be doctoring up. So, how much fun is that? How are you guys doing after the break?
Oh, I needed that little bit of break. I got to tell you, it was nice. I missed everyone, but it was nice. Catch up on some stuff.
Yeah, I drug a cold for 10 days, so it wasn't feeling much like a break for me, but I'm feeling much better today.
Oh, that's always good. I know that for me, we were definitely working on the Women's Summit. So before we get in our power chat, I can just say that I was just on a call talking about our 100 seats in Virginia are up, and the Women's Summit is how we are going to power up to make sure that we control people's minds in Virginia to vote.
You will vote blue. You will vote blue. You
Will
will vote
vote blue.
blue.
We need that. So, anyways, I know that I also want to say to sisters and brothers out there on the overpasses in Virginia is lit up with activism. So, I'm going to push that over to you guys to talk about important things that relate to our show today.
Well, before we go there, I did want to take a minute. It was in the chat, but I also put it in our notes that the day is June 6th. So this is the 81st anniversary of D-Day. And so I just thought it would be really important as we think about all of the things that are happening in June that this is one thing that we ought to just take a minute to think about. So
Yeah. And I've been reading a lot about sort of the mentality of the military being attacked.
Yes.
We're down here in Hampton Roads, home of the world's largest Navy base. We are very dedicated to supporting our veterans. There's been a lot of talk about what motivates veterans. Recently, people have been saying that they're most dedicated to protecting their own. That is not the case, and I think D-Day just shows you that they are fighting for our freedom 100%, and that we cannot let their integrity or their fidelity to liberty be questioned by the Republicans who are trying to somehow make it out that they're just out to protect their own. They're not. They're real patriots, and we owe a lot to them. So thanks for bringing that up for now.
yeah, and I think that the last thing I would say is when you think about history and how important it is for us to understand our history and to know it and to not let it slip away, there are probably not very many folks who are still surviving from that era, from that war. So it's just something that we just always got to hold close, and that's why history is so very important. All of our history. Yeah.
Well, I want to remind last year, I think when this date came up, I told the story about my great uncle John Zarlango. I want to make sure I say that name. I try to remember every year because he died on the beaches of Normandy, Utah Beach. He was only 23 years old, Italian immigrant, came over here and signed up to go fight and never really made it to that beach when those doors opened up. And I think about him all the time and that optimism. So when I look about what's going on now, I would think he would be so appalled at how what this government is doing and the government he fought for back
Right.
then, what they were facing with Nazism, right?
Right.
Yeah.
They saw these despots. They saw the type of narcissists that Dr. Hassan's going to tell us more about today. I mean, they saw that in action, and they fought and watched people
Yeah,
die to save us from personalities like that. And here we go again. And I'm
right.
really interested to talk to him today about how Trumpism and the cult of Trump is just suppressing critical thinking, suppressing the urge to do the right thing.
Yeah. Well,
Very
it's
Yeah.
funny.
interesting.
I can go all day. I think about all the propaganda that came out of, these different eras and different leaders. So that'll be a really kind of an informative for us to understand it because we're in the middle of it and it's really understand how we could protect ourselves. So
Right.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
it's
Yeah.
more than messaging.
Yep.
Yeah, it really is. The other thing that I think is going to be really relevant is June 14th, the No King's Day. And so when we talk to Dr. Stephanie Wilson Gerber Wilson, we'll hear how important it is for activism and how it really plays a part in terms of how you fight fascism. So June 14th, No Kings, that's another opportunity and another way that we fight all of the stuff that's happening.
Right. And she's from Massachusetts. She's in Massachusetts. I think it's great. I was talking about banners for the June 14th rally, and I thought, I have a banner that says Women of Hampton Roads sticking up to bullies since 1607. Take that. And we've been fighting
Exactly.
fascism in Norfolk, Virginia since 1632. So there you go.
There
There
you
you go.
yeah.
There you go.
We've been doing it a long time. I'm not ready to give it up.
Yeah. So June 17th, the primaries for Virginia. which is great. June 14th is the last day to vote early, and then June 17th is actually when it's general for everybody to vote at your precinct. So
Yeah.
June 17th for that. And then Catherine, there's something else coming up too, right?
Well, probably. I'm just,
Wonder.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Wonder.
June 28th, right? Well, June 27th through 29th, the summit, but
let's not, I'm just laughing. I'm like, yeah, it's all about the Women's Summit on June 28th, right? And let's just not, let's just go there. But I want to talk about the primary real quick because I was just on a call with the markers community. If you're in the room for markers, we went over there to talk about Virginia elections, and you're in the room. I saw people from Santa Barbara, California, our national friends. We know how important Virginia is. So our primary is coming up. Be interesting to see the voting turnout. We don't have the governor's race on because she has no primary on the ballot. So it's a little bit of not that early vote push we're always talking about, but we do have some interesting primaries where Democrats are primarying some incumbents. We're having some, at least two races where some Democrats are trying to take out sort of people that have been in that seat for a while. So that's some interesting primary stuff going on. I don't know if you guys have your eye on any primaries down in Virginia Beach. You have one, don't you? That's
We have a primary in House District 89 that kind of straddles Chesapeake and Suffolk, which is an important place
right.
for CD2 eventually. We have two very dedicated activists running against each other in the primary. So that's what's happening in HD 89. And then, of course, we're watching HD 99, which, of
Right.
course, we're going to get into later. But, you know, June 18th, man, we hit the ground running. That's what I'm
Yeah,
just going to be
that's what I'm.
once we get our candidates, we're
Well,
hitting it.
yeah, the interesting thing for people on the outside who writing and all that, the Grassroots Coalition here will be really organizing and around all the candidates. And we have power packs that we've organized with the candidates in there. So you can adopt them, look at the power packs, figure out how to help them. We'll help you with that.
They've
But
done so much research on those power packs.
yeah,
It's been amazing. They've been working on for a really long time.
these are all our rural candidates. There's so much going on, but I digress in a way, but I am really excited for those of you pissed off and outraged. And there's so much is going on where we see these people being disappeared. That one I think was in Boston. This young man taken out of a car going to a volleyball game with his teammates. This is the kind of reality that's really sinking in. But Virginia, I concentrate on these people that need our help. We can start to crush it here. And if we can crush it here and we could show we can do it, it will really could turn the tide. So use that and bring it to us in Virginia. We need everybody helping and doing everything they can. And then, of course, we do have the primary that for our former Congressman Connolly passed away. And it was very sad to lose him right now in this fight because there's no one in our seat I can call. The other day when I wanted to complain about something, I go, there's no one there. I can't call Jerry. He's not going to be able to help. And that really, really in a tough time when we have people disappearing, Jerry's voice would be loud. But we do have a primary coming up and it'll be June 28th in Virginia. And that's another crazy thing on top of the other layer.
yeah, yeah, it really is. But we'll figure that out. But
Will
I
we?
just wanted to go back to the disappearing for just a minute because I think what you're saying there is really important. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to quote who I always quote, and that's Linda Hersham, who says, "Make injustice public." And there was a lady in Missouri who was disappeared, and in the town that she came from, voted 80% for Trump. But that whole town came together to get that woman out of jail. And so I just think that's why it's so important for us to talk about this stuff, to make it public so that people see that what is happening is not necessarily what they voted for.
And I would be not doing my job if I didn't say about some of the things on your mind when we talked about the big, beautiful bill. Who wants to
Yeah.
take that on? And then any other thing on your mind, and then we'll introduce our guests.
Okay, perfect. The big beautiful bill. Yeah.
Big
So
disgusting bill. Did I
the,
say
the
it
big
wrong?
disgusting bill. But here's what I think that Dr. Hassan and Stephanie will both talk about is these naming conventions that they give to stuff that is purposeful,
Yeah.
and I really do want to hear from them about that and why it's so important. And then just in terms of this whole Elon Musk thing, is there an opportunity for us to take advantage of that and do it the right way? So I can't wait to hear about that.
Kind of makes you wonder if he's having a moment where that I know Dr. Hassan's talked about when you suddenly realize that the person at the top, this narcissistic cult leader, suddenly has a chink in the armor, and it makes you start questioning all the other things they could have potentially lied about. I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of the folks that have a cult following, like Elon
Yes.
Musk, pitted against the people with the cult following like Trump. Who is going to win out on that? They can't both admit that someone is wrong, right? So
Right.
somebody in this exchange is going to be wrong. What is it going to do to the other side? Because
Yes.
they are blindly followed, both of them. So this is going to be a really interesting fallout, I think.
I think you're right. It's so interesting you said that. And I knew you can watch the spin doctors already. And that's always when you see the right wing extremist media, they are already spinning the Medicaid thing their way. They're trying to spin. And so that's why it's so important for us in this Virginia race is to do the spinning ourselves to get ahead of that stuff. Because if you can set the facts straight, it's really hard later for somebody to come and sort of undo that. So with that said, I want to make sure we have time for the guests today. All of you out there, thank you for being here. We're so happy that you joined us. It's June 6th, 2025. And yes, you are on Network Nova's Live Friday Power Lunch. We are the hosts today, bringing you all the issues, action, all in one room. We fuel the grassroots. That's what we do. And we like to make it fun. And make sure if you're new that you can use the chat to say all kind of great stuff, talk to each other. If you get nasty, we'll kick your butt out. And if you're a Patreon, thank you for putting money in our show and investing in women doing the work. We really appreciate it. I'd like to see, I was kind of like a little sad. I'm like, we only have 149 or 159 patrons. We should have a room full. We really should for the stuff that we really do. We appreciate our patrons. So thank you for that. And also follow us on Substack. But today we're here to listen to two great guests. And our topic is cults and fascism, finding the way out. And Dr. is in. They're both in to give us the news. So welcome to Dr. Stephanie Gerber Wilson. She produces, and if you haven't watched it, she's on Substack like us, Freedom Over Fascism. She's a historian, activist, and an expert in communications. We're excited to have her in our badass community. Welcome, Stephanie. And Dr. Steve Hassan, a licensed mental health professional. You may have seen him on a lot of different media and shows. And if you follow him on his channel, I'm going to tell you, he has so much content. But what's great about him, he recognized he's an expert on cults because he was in a cult before, and he'll tell you a little bit about his background. So he has firsthand experience. He's the founding director of the Freedom and Mind Resource Center. So we're excited to have him today because he also authored this last recent book, The Cult of Trump. So I'm very excited. And today we have a special format. I'm going to turn it over to Fennell to describe our format today and then let this show take off. So thank y'all.
Yes, so it's going to be very, very exciting today. So one of the things that we were really excited about having Dr. Hassan was that we'd have a chance to have him in the after chat so that you all would be able to ask him some questions. There's no way that Carrie and I are going to get to everything. So Carrie and I will lead also a discussion in the after chat with Dr. Hassan, and then you guys will be able to ask him questions because I know that you are burning to find out what you can do about some of your family members and friends who are doing things that you just thought were never possible. So, but before we get started, I want to bring up Dr. Stephanie Gerber Wilson. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so excited. So let me just tell you quickly how I met Stephanie. I was going through, as I usually do, on Substack reading, and I was reading comments, which sometimes are very interesting to read what people say. And when I saw her comments, I was like, oh my goodness, she fights fire with fire. I want to talk to her. And so I immediately sent her a note, and she was gracious enough to talk back to me. And here she is. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Stephanie.
Thank you so much to you guys for something's. I have to dismiss something. Okay, for having me on here. First of all, badass is like the best compliment I think that exists, particularly badass women. So thank you for having me on. I've been aware of you guys for a really long time. And I'm really happy to talk to you about framing and how the Republicans do it well, how we are terrible at it, and how we can get better on it. So let's go. Oh, and also I am from Lexington, Massachusetts. Yes, the birthplace of liberty. Here we have a group called Lexington Alarm who has created signs called "No Kings, No Tyranny," and on the back a Patrick Henry quote. So they're shipping them all over, and so if anybody's interested in getting something like that from the source, then I can put you in touch with whoever. I don't remember their website, but it's Lexington Alarm, and I have a picture of it up on my Substack from my front lawn. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So we'll make sure that they have information on your Substack and your podcast, which, by the way, your podcasts are positively amazing. And so one of the things that I'll say is that you talk very openly about making sure that you're sourcing information from the very best places. There are a lot of not fans here on this call today, so that is cool. So where I'd like you to start is why you started this work and why you think it's so important. And then the second thing that we'll talk about is some of the people that you've been most fascinated with in terms of how you think about how we win this war over fascism.
So I started off, being a regular old, just a voter kind of girl before the until the Trump was elected. And about 2018, I was like, this is ridiculous. I need to get more involved. So I became a volunteer for Pete Buttigieg. And then I was on this sort of parallel social media team for the Biden campaign. And after that, I started one nonprofit around messaging, trying to replicate what we did at the Biden Digital Coalition. And then I started another one to help people from Indiana take back red states. And from that, that's where this podcast began. And I wanted to really focus on people who are in the fight, people who are experts, people who have success behind them, who can talk about how to break through, because we're in completely different information environments. People on the other side, I'm sure Dr. Hassan will talk about this, are not getting the same information we are. So we have to do things that break through this Fox, Newsmax, whatever bubble that they're in, and they get a lot of information from cultural podcasts and whatever. So we need to find a way to be talking about politics without talking about politics. And when I talked to Ben Rhodes a couple of weeks ago, it was up yesterday, he even said, we need to go on all of those kinds of podcasts. And if we're on a sports podcast, we need to talk about sports, not politics. We need to talk about music, not politics. So, so that's exactly what, I've been saying. And the way I think about it is we talk about our values in places that people are, and we talk using language that reframes the other side's language because they are masters. Okay, big, beautiful bill. That's the actual name of the bill,
It
right?
is.
So it forces people to use that. Anat has been very clear that we should be calling it the MAGA murder budget.
Mm-hmm.
And that is controversial, and that's good. Because when you talk about MAGA murder budget, people are like, is it really about murder? How much is it about murder? It's like the death panels, right? With the ACA.
Right.
So I am always interested in figuring out how to reframe arguments using our own language, not repeating theirs, and therefore reinforcing it, and to get people to know more and hear more from people they might not already hear from.
So let me ask this question that I'm sure everybody else is thinking, and that is when we say how to talk about politics without talking about politics. So we're going to talk about values, or we're going to talk about music. How do we get into that? And I guess maybe it becomes even more important when you're talking to family and friends at the dinner table, because we never ever discuss politics on Thanksgiving. So how's that work?
Well, I think we come together on the things that we have in common: sports, music, whatever it is, right? And then we just lead with our values, because the reality is that at least 70% of the country shares our values. they just don't know necessarily that the side they're supporting doesn't support their values because the other side is so good at framing the conversation. Um, Fox News has not talked about Medicaid cuts hardly at all, right? But we know people will die.
Right.
So, my suggestion is to just really start with, like the things you agree on, even just values. Hey, I know we disagree on how to get there, but like we all deserve to be able to get health care and to be able to pay for it. And then like just leave it at that. Like all the things that we all need to be able to put food on the table. We all need to be able to live. It's like the New Hampshire motto, live free or die. All the things that we have in common. And there's so many if we take out the politics. And most people are not like us. They don't follow politics on a minute by minute basis. I think probably we ought to be more like that sometimes. So really just starting with our values is the way I think about talking to people. That's the way I think about talking about politics without talking about politics. It's a values conversation. It's not a political conversation. It's not about candidates. It's not about Trump. It's about what we share and our values that we believe in.
Yeah, I think that's right. You're going to probably have to do some more teaching to us to get that right because we obviously don't go down that path. I have a really hard question for you that might not get answered here, but it might get answered in the
Okay,
after chat if you're able to say.
I can
So
say.
I was reading an article, and it was actually a study that was done. Someone had done, they'd gone out and they interviewed a bunch of people, and this was mostly in rural areas. And they would say, yes, Medicaid has saved my life, and I really believe in Medicaid care. And then the person would say, well, what do you think about universal health care? And they would say, oh, no, 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 we shouldn't have universal health care. So it was sort of like, if the valuable thing helped me, that's great. But if the valuable thing helps other people, then I'm not for that valuable thing. I'm not saying they can't get there, but I'm just really curious about that kind of thinking when we talk about values. Yes, you and me believe that people should be cared for, but only if it's people like me.
Right. So here's where the right is so genius. Everything they say is talking to you, Fanal, you, Laura, like that campaign, she's talking about they, them, we're talking about you is
Hmm. Hmm.
freaking brilliant. So we often say we need this and this and this for everybody, right? And they don't care, as you say, about everybody. So we need to find a way to say, we want you to have it, and then let them be the center of the story,
Hmm.
as opposed to saying, you need to think about trans kids.
Hmm.
Like they've never met a trans kid in their lives. So they're like thinking, okay, like whatever, this is a weird kid. It doesn't exist in my world. So, whatever. But if we're talking about like, don't you want to be able to wear what you want? Have you ever wanted to be called by a nickname? Have
Hmm.
you ever felt weird in your own body, like it didn't quite fit? Like let's get them thinking about themselves, and then we can widen it out. And I think we're going to need candidates for whenever that know how to do that, because we're so often talking about everybody else as Democrats,
Hmm.
and we need to center the voter. We have to be talking about them, and then they can kind of widen it out. But it's an uphill road. I mean, because the Republicans are trying to divide us, succeeding quite well. And so, you know, bringing us together, I think, has to be a little bit sub rosa.
Yeah. Okay. This is fascinating. I don't know that if we ask you, but I think Catherine did that you'd be able to stay for the after chat. which would be awesome. That was a fascinating answer, and it's the one that I needed because I don't think I do that very well, but I'm going to practice it because I think I can learn to do that better. So, Stephanie, thank you so much. We will see you in the after chat. And I think that everybody should be as fascinated as I am about your podcast because there is one that you do with Christine Tedeschi,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal, and everyone should listen to that one.
Oh, thanks. And also, you put my information in. Guys, just go to freedomoverfascism.us. The website is my old communications consulting business, so it's not worth anything.
Okay, cool.
Go to
All right. Freedom over
freedomoverfascism.us.
fascism. We'll see you in the after chat.
Sounds great.
Okay, that's fantastic. So bring up my friend Carrie, and then we're going to get started. Carrie, how was that?
Awesome. I always love hearing about the kind of bringing it back. I love that she's taking it out on her own and doing a podcast to help other people. I think that's fantastic. I hope it motivates everybody because everyone's a podcaster these days. Let's jump in there. Everyone's got a good message. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So
Yeah.
now you and I are going to have a chance to talk to Dr. Stephen Hassan. And this is going to be fascinating because you have some experience with cult. And so we're going to bring up Dr. Hassan, and I'm going to already tell him that you and I are big talkers, but I'm going to talk less, and you're going to talk more. And then we'll make sure that Dr. Hassan gets to say all that he needs to say. Dr. Hassan, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks. And nice to meet Dr. Wilson for the first time virtually.
So we have a lot to talk about, and I'm going to let Carrie get started because she is the expert in terms of me, between the two of us. And you're the real expert, but we have lots of questions. And so, Carrie, I'll let you go ahead and jump in and get started, and then I'll jump in too.
Well, thanks. I did want to just repeat that Dr. Stephen Hassan is the founder and the founding director of Freedom of Mind Resource Center, which is an amazing website. They have some downloadable resources for you to take a look at. He's the leading expert in cults and mind control. He has several books on the subject, and right now, what we're really excited about is the book "The Cult of Trump," where he provides an eye-opening analysis of the Trump administration and how they have moved through. In fact, not just the administration, the whole movement has moved through the process of indoctrinating us and really getting into this mind control that's very similar to cults. So it's very validating to hear you talk about this as a cult because some of us who have experienced cults or are familiar with cults and how they control the communication, it sounds exactly like a cult. So it's so validating to hear you say that. But before we get into that aspect of it, I'd really love for you to just briefly explain your experience having interacted with the cult previously in your life. And then I want you to tell us about the BITE model, that method of brain control, and tell us how we can recognize it based on your own experience.
Sure. So back in 1974, February, and I might add the same month Patty Hearst was physically abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army, yours truly was depressed because my girlfriend dumped me and was sitting in the cafeteria table at Queens College waiting for my classes to start. And three women started flirting with me and asked to sit at my table. And they lied. They said they were students, which they weren't. They said they weren't part of a religious group, but they were recruiters for the Moonies cult. Sun Myung Moon claimed to be the Messiah, 10 times greater than Jesus Christ. Long story short, through a series of events, I got inducted into this right-wing fascist cult called the Moonies. Was told to drop out of college, quit my job, donate my bank account. I got totally radicalized in 1974. I was 19 years old. And they selected me. I was an extra honor student and pretty bright. And they groomed me to be a leader. So I got to be in the room with Sun Myung Moon and the top leadership as Moon was saying, we're going to infiltrate the US government, that God doesn't like democracy, it's satanic, we need a theocracy. So I've written my story in Combating Cult Mind Control. and I would have died on command or killed on command. And this was not yours truly from a nice Jewish conservative upbringing who wrote poetry like girls and played basketball. And I was promised my own country when we took over the world. And at 21 years of age, that was heady, but I was made to believe I should be a small Sun Myung Moon. So I became
Right.
this malignant narcissist, which is the stereotypical profile, as you showed in my interview with David Pakman, the stereotypical profile of cult leaders. Long story short, I almost died in a van crash. Was in the hospital away from the cult for 2 weeks, led to a deprogramming where I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing techniques. And Robert J. Lifton's work, his book, 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, was what gave me the criteria to go, wait a minute, we do that. But we're God and they're Satan.
Right.
This does not compute. And it led to my awakening, at which point I was really confused, ashamed, embarrassed, and wanted to understand what what was brainwashing and what was mind control. So I sought out the top military experts who had studied it and told them how the Moonies operated. And they're like, you know more than we know. You've lived it. You did it to other people. Study psychology. So that was, now you're meeting me 49 years later, full time, helping people get out of mind control situations, studying hypnosis, um, authored 5 books, the 4 TEDx talks. But
And
this
you've broken
book,
down and you've broken down the methods of control using this bite model. So can you
yes, thank
explain
you.
that to us? Yeah.
So the first thing I want to share, this is free on my website, freedomofmind.com, but it's the framework that I think every American needs to understand. Ethical influence gives you informed consent, respects your conscience, your free will, your critical thinking. Ethical leadership is psychologically healthy and responsible and transparent, the checks and balances of groups. And I've created a model called the BITE model of authoritarian control. And I'll just say that mind control is a dissociative phenomenon. It's in the DSM-5 as a disruption of identity. And when people get radicalized, their real self is still there, but now they've got this cult programming, kind of like how a computer gets hacked by malware. So I've taken all the brainwashing model, and this is in my doctoral dissertation, which is also on freedom of mind and in Spanish. We had it translated. And I basically, from my own experience and then interviewing thousands of former members of political cults, religious cults, therapy cults, commercial cults, trafficking, extremist groups, if the more of the behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control variables, the more extreme the authoritarian mind control is.
And so
So
those are
it's
the four, the behavior, the emotional.
information, thoughts, and it's very common sense. When I explain it to people, they're like, "Yeah, if you deprive people of sleep, if you put phobias in people's minds, that if they question the group or try to leave, bad things are going to happen to them."
Yeah.
And I'll just say that in the Moonies, when I learned about phobias, I was like, when did they put the phobia in my mind? They actually took me and hundreds of Moonies to see the Exorcist movie. And then we went to hear Moon speak, and Moon said, God made this movie. This is a prophecy of what will happen if you leave the Unification Church. So I can cite that experience as the critical moment where I stopped allowing my doubts to exist because I now interpreted them as demons trying to possess me.
We
So,
we had Andra Watkins on the show, and she deals with right Christo-fascist cults and that behavior. And she
Mhm.
talked a lot about that as well. I am so glad you brought up the disruption of self, because experience working in some counter cult education when the Boston Church of Christ came to the University of Miami. You're familiar with that cult?
Well, they started in Lexington, Mass. So I've
Uh-oh,
been helping
Stephanie.
people
Yep.
out of that since '89.
It's a tough one, and you're right, they don't prey on a
It was
lonely.
actually '82. Sorry, I
So,
interrupted you.
and they don't prey on the lonely loser kid in the corner. They're preying on people who are
College
attractive,
students.
leadership, college students. And that was certainly happening in my experience. But this disrupting the person's sense of self, right? You're smart and you're getting what we would call influencers now are getting approached by this cult of Trump. And what I'd like to know is what is this crisis of self right now? This pervasive attack on our sense of self right now. What is making people so vulnerable to this right now?
Well, whenever there's economic, political uncertainty, people are much more vulnerable to an authoritarian voice that says, I know the truth. I can tell you I know more than the generals, etc. But I want to shift gears for a second because it's absolutely pivotal that I say this. And it's especially timely because of the Musk-Trump
Yeah.
fight that just happened. What I want to tell you, your audience, is that I was a whistleblower for a congressional subcommittee investigation into South Korean intelligence agencies' infiltration of the U.S. because the Moonies was a front group for a CIA, KCIA right-wing operation. And the Moonies are still in play to this moment. The Moonies paid Trump $2.5 million a few weeks after January 6th. They have a gun cult in Pennsylvania, an AR-15 cult that has been going around with Michael Flynn recruiting people for militias. They have a training compound in Tennessee and near Waco, Texas. But what I want to say to my audience, people actually should read the book because
Yeah.
I have a whole section on how Russia is the puppet master of Trump. They recruited him in the 80s. And I've been trying to get on mainstream media. I used to be on media all the time before I wrote this book. And I had a few appearances on CNN and MSNBC in the last 6 years. But for the most part, there's been a
But
blacklist
don't
going.
you think that we sound hyperbolic when we say things like that? It's very hard for us right now because you point out something completely different than anyone else we've had on, where everyone else talks about messaging and we have to get back to values. We have to be empathetic. We don't want to argue with them. You
Well, I
can't beat them on
agree
facts.
completely with that.
But
It's what I've been
right,
teaching people is you can't argue logically attacking the
exactly.
cult leader, the doctrine, or the policy. You need to develop rapport and trust, which is what Dr. Wilson was talking about, meeting them where they're at, finding common ground, and establishing a relationship with the person. Then you
Right.
have a chance to ask them questions. That's the most powerful technique for helping people exit radicalization. Because
And
when
then you
you're in a
say, ask him a
cult, you don't
question.
believe you're in a cult. When you're
Very
brainwashed,
true.
you don't believe you're brainwashed.
Right.
But MAGA people believe Chinese communist brainwash. You can talk about the techniques and the bite model with China or traffickers or pimps or traffickers. So
Mhm.
the idea is how to share the information in a way that doesn't trigger the cult identity that they've been
Right.
programmed with. And you were talking about words triggering. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to jump in here with you and Carrie. Good Lord. So one of the things that I want to be sure that we get to is the media, because you do a whole chapter in the book where you talk about the media, and I want you to talk about that because the media is not our friend in this process. So I want you to hopefully get to the media, and I want you to also get to everybody who's part of this Trump cult isn't really part of the cult, but they're there for a different kind of reason. So that sort of helps us understand who we're dealing with. So can you
Yeah,
just talk about
tens of
that?
millions of Americans are in cults, and the cult leaders are telling them to follow Trump because God chose Trump. So the intervention has to be at a different level and utilizing former members of, for example, New Apostolic Reformation is one of the biggest mega churches and networks of cults. And what's different about real Christianity is these are cults where the leader says, I'm an apostle. I'm a prophet. I speak directly to God. And God told me Trump won the 2020 election. And don't listen to that satanic media. They're demons. Those Democrats are demons. And they have these phobias. So they're not going to listen, just like I wouldn't listen to an ex-Mooney when I was a Mooney. But the key thing is, right, what I want to add right now and why this is not normal politics is AI and social media and Palantir. And we have a video of Peter Thiel in 2010 saying, we're never going to win with trying to convince people we should use technology. And we know for a fact Cambridge Analytica hacked Facebook, got millions of people's profiles. They've been micro messaging and targeting, and now they have AIs on it. There was just a report published by the University of Zurich where they were using bots on Reddit to change people's minds. It was obviously a research effort from a university, but they proved the point that people's minds can get hacked online by AI and using our personal data. So we're in a whole nother level of psychological warfare with state actors like Russia and China and bad actors in the US. And we're like flailing around thinking things are just like politics are normal and the 2026 election, we're going to flip it. It's not the same anymore.
When you were talking about breaking people out of cults, you talk about helping them think critically. Even if their conclusions are not going to be the same as our conclusions, we'll still save them if we can remind them of how to think critically, right? And to ask questions and be curious. How do we create, and I know this is in the book, but I'm asking for you to sort of talk about this for the folks who haven't. You create that moment where someone is called up short between what they think is real and what's really real. And then you're quiet, right? You are
You have to
quiet.
leave a long silence because the goal is to empower them to think, not
That's
to
right.
persuade them with facts.
That I think is the biggest difference in some of the things that you're talking about versus what a lot of other people are talking about, is that it is not about persuasion. It's not about messaging. It's about somehow triggering them to
No,
have
it's
that.
messaging. It's definitely messaging and it's not triggering them. Triggering is basically a cue that stimulus response, Pavlov,
Mhm.
etc. And we have natural triggers to healthy things. The point is,
Mhm.
we don't want negative triggers to.
Right.
So there's a key point about I was 19 when I got recruited. I had a sense of self. I had clear values and goals. I was, you know, um, not a joiner. But so the key was getting to the real me. And what worked in my deprogramming was this one individual of the four that would say, "What do you think, Steve? What do you think about what they were just saying there?" And I'd literally be telling them how to get me out of the Moonies. Well, I don't like what Nestor said about this. That's never going to work. And what Gladys said, that made sense. So I was like, but because he was asking me to reflect and think about it. So the key is if somebody's gotten radicalized into MAGA, finding out who they were before, getting their family and friends to unblock them and say, I miss you, and let's not talk politics, but let's get together, go fishing, go play ball together, etc. Get to the real self. There are a lot of people who've exited authoritarian cults who've gotten into MAGA. So it's more complicated with those folks as they don't have that base to go back to, but they can be helped too by talking about something they think is a cult. And we have some really powerful documentaries about other groups, sitting and watching it with somebody and asking their opinion as they're watching about Nexium or Scientology or some of these other cults. It starts seeding a framework for reality testing.
So let's stop right there because we get to have Dr. Hassan for a little more time. So we're going to move over to the after chat. So Dr. Hassan, we're going to put you back into the audience. We're going to bring up Katherine, and then we're going to just end the show, and we're going to move over to the after chat and be able to continue this conversation. So this is fantastic, right, Carrie?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we can
Pins and
ask them some more
needles.
questions. And I've been watching the
So
chat,
do
so
I
thank you
just
all for
wait?
your
Yeah,
questions.
just wait a second. We got to wrap up. Well, I am telling you, it's 12:50. So we can wrap up and then go over to that. So the doctor knows that what we do is we're going to roll our credits and then roll over for the next half an hour. So just take a break, get some water. But I had so many questions. I'm sitting here going, Russia, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel the same way what he was saying. I'm like, I feel like a crazy person when I put all the pieces together.
Well, he does. I mean, we'll talk about this again, but he has the self-reinforcing pyramid of cult power, which is like that's where the media and all these people, what Fanal was saying, like what my biggest wonder was before I started looking into all of his work was how are these people just going along with it? There are smart people. And I think that's what's so hard to think about is that our friends who we love, even when we don't agree on politics, we still love them, are now saying things that we can no longer just agree to disagree.
Exactly.
It's gotten to that point. Like,
I
I'm
know.
not going to agree to disagree with you because you're starving children in my
Yeah.
country. I just can't agree to disagree on that.
Yeah.
Hey, Katherine, I did stop us early. I'm sorry, I looked
Yes,
at my
you
watch. I
did.
thought it was 12:55. Do you want to bring Dr. Hassan back? Or are you
No,
okay?
I think we need to do and just continue. Yeah, because I was like watching, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. But I have so much in the after chat to ask him, and that's where we're going to go.
Okay.
Our audience should stick with us. I want to make sure that that we're just going to have a moment to remind people about the Women's Summit. We have really great speakers who will be talking about communications and media that are coming to the summit, from Robert Hubble to we also have Courier News with the Virginia Dogwood coming, bringing all kind of influencers of our own to the summit. Do a lot of storytelling with Red Wine and Blue are also bringing a media room that we'll be talking about storytelling there. And we have Kyle Spencer coming down who talks about the right-wing extremism and how we really break through this media bubble, as you say, to get this message out. So I want to make sure people know, get your tickets, that how important it is. The summit is this year, and that we also have some new patrons. Thank you, Mary Du Bois. I think it's Du Bois, DB, for thank you for being a patron. And anything else for the wrap up? And we'll just do a special, just quickly run our credits and then go over to the other side.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk as much about it. We did with Stephanie, but I do want to hear more about the fight between Musk and Trump in terms of if that opens any opportunities for us in terms of how we might break through a little bit easier and what we ought to be doing and saying. And I think Dr. Hassan, as well as Dr. Wilson, give us things that we can do as individuals, because I think you sometimes feel like it's helpless. There's nothing to be done. And if we did that, then we'd just be giving up. But there are things that we can do individually with our friends and family and acquaintances. And then I also just want to say, a doctor, not doctor, but Elizabeth Chur, who's going to be here a week early. And so we'll have an opportunity, people will have an opportunity to see her then. But then we have all her books. I just got 3 giant boxes of books on the joy of talking politics to strangers. So we'll get to buy those books at the summit too. So it'll be pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Elizabeth,
I think I think it is really time to reframe this because I know all of us are really tired of hearing the leadership people saying there's nothing we can do. I'm just so tired of hearing it. I heard it just in an interview with Rahm Emanuel the other day, and he said again, "Well, when you're not in power, there's not much you can do." These strategies that we're talking about right now are things we can do right now to save our friends and family, to restore their ability to think critically and ask good questions. We can prepare ourselves to be better messengers, and we can all learn how to do this so that yeah, we can actually do something. If I hear one more time, we need to reframe that. We don't want to hear one more time there's nothing we can do because we're not in the majority. There's a lot we can do, and one of them is work one-on-one with people we care about and get them to
Well, let's
step
make
out of
sure
the
that we
cult.
have the time to let the Dr. Hassan talk more about, Stephen talk more about what's going on. Because like I said, I saw his interview about Elon Musk and this recent chaos that's going on there and what that means. And what I want to say is this higher level of Russia back in the 80s recruiting Trump is what I have seen all these pieces too, and makes me feel like I'm crazy because I'm connecting the bots and the dots, and I'm like, people aren't really looking at the bigger picture. So that said, Denis,
Well, he just called it the Russian hoax, and that just
Russian
took care of
hoax,
that.
yeah. So let's just roll our credits and then we'll go to the after chat. But I think we're going to still record the after chat because of everything that we need to hear. So go ahead.
Thanks. So, I guess I need to start with hypnosis. And what's on the web right now is a plethora of people claiming they know hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. When I first saw, and I should say that I learned NLP in 1980 and 81 when I was getting out of the Moonies. I had read everything I could find on brainwashing, and I was like, there's something missing, and I don't know what it is. And I went to a workshop and I saw Richard Bandler, who is one of the co-founders of NLP, hypnotizing people and making them do stuff. And I was like, I used to talk like that in the Moonies. And what I learned, what I realized is that they didn't use the word hypnosis, but they were training me how to hypnotize people to recruit them. They would say things like, Steve, the eyes are the window of the soul. And so if you look through people's eyes and make an imaginary point where your fingers intersect and just look into people's eyes like this, hi there, and talk and tell me about what you think about, who's going to save the world. So, and I was in a Mooney trance. I can also just say a dissociative identity. It was like I believed it so emphatically that it would suck people into, wow, he's so certain and he's so confident and he's so smart. And I know that was part of what got me to convinced in the beginning was people from Princeton and Yale and Harvard sitting in the workshops. So, what I want to say about hypnosis is that human beings go in and out of trance normally all day long. It's, we daydream when we're fantasizing about the future, remembering the past. So, it's very different than if some agent has an agenda from the outside wanting to install a belief or a phobia. And what's happening now is, and I promise this is true, I've talked to 5 people who came to me, and I've asked on my social media for more people to come forward. They haven't yet, but I've talked to 5 who said, I was going in November to vote for Kamala Harris, and when I got to the polling station, I had an overwhelming fear to not vote for her, and I voted for Trump. One of the 5 said I felt a compulsion to vote for Trump, even though he was planning to vote for Kamala Harris. And this is just going by everybody's awareness that our minds are getting messed with. And I did an interview with the Center for Humane Technology. I don't know if you've seen the Social Dilemma documentary. It's on Netflix. Everyone needs to watch it and watch it with your children, I would add, to protect them. But they interviewed me and talked about how being online and social media makes you go into a trance. This doom scrolling, that one of the hypnotic features is called distortion of time. So when you say, I'm going to look at Instagram for 10 minutes and then 2 hours later, you're like, what happened? Now, what's happening to you? And TikTok's the worst. TikTok is evil. It's a Chinese frickin' app. People need to understand China's finding out what's happening with your brain from being on any social media, but particularly TikTok. I am not on TikTok. I confess my social media team has me on TikTok because they say you need to teach about the bite model. So I'm on there. But people need to understand we're not in the same world as we were even 5 years ago. And in the next year, these deep fakes where they can hack people's voices and etc., saying stuff, it's going to become even more important that your listening audience knows you have to go to trustworthy people with credentials who are experts who know what they're talking about for your information, because if you're just floating around waiting for AI algorithms to feed you stuff, you're in trouble.
Would you mind if we went and got some questions from some of the folks who've stayed on? Does that
Please,
work for
but I
you?
also want Stephanie Wilson to be
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah, so can we
She's an
bring up Dr.
expert
Wilson?
too.
Yes.
All right, we want to call on Nadine. You've got your hand up. Do you have a question for us? Sorry about your hand.
Oh, gosh.
Looks like
You
quite
have
a
to
contraption you
unmute,
have.
Nadine.
She's trying. She seems to have her hand in a box.
It's the
Trying to
microphone in the
Oh.
lower left of the
mute
Zoom.
there. Okay, I got unmuted.
Yeah.
I know you held up a chart and you were saying, I thought you were saying there are four basic somethings. And somehow I just heard two and I missed it. And so maybe you said it, but I think maybe the conversation diverged. So I thought you were telling four major things. Secondly, I wanted to know, would you say there are differences between military indoctrination, like when people go into the boot camp and they try to take away their identity? Is that just is that similar, or are there ways that people still are able to keep their identity? Maybe they
Great
don't cut off the
questions.
media so much.
Great.
And lastly, I want to say, could everybody please go to Galvanize USA? And she is doing things that you are recommending. She's getting people in values conversational groups that change their minds because they see other people share their values. So it's Jackie Payne's group, and so she's got Galvanize USA, and I
Thank
suggest
you,
people
Nadine.
look into her.
Let's let him
Thanks.
answer. Go
So
ahead.
very quickly, I'd like to ask whoever's helping you with the podcast to just go to Freedom of Mind, download the Influence Continuum and Bite Model, give the links in the thing. The Bite Model stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional Control. And I've written and talked about the difference between the military, which is mind control for sure, because they're creating a new identity as a soldier who's going, with a uniform and a number and a protocol and a language. But people have informed consent, you're getting paid, there's a justice system, you're signing up for a set amount of time. There are variables that make it very different. When you're in a mind control cult like the Moonies, there's never a legitimate reason to leave or question a leader. In the army or the military, if you're given an order that violates your conscience, you can disobey and should disobey. And that's another point. I've been telling people, if you have a friend or family member in the military, it's time to start asking them the question. If you were given an order to shoot peaceful protesters in the street, what would you do? Because that's what's coming down the pike, I'm afraid, or at least what they want to come down the pike. And I'm counting on the military as an institution sworn to the Constitution, even though they took away the inspector generals. I'm counting on the military to say no way.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, did you want to did you have a comment about that to add?
Oh, well, I completely agree. And I keep putting the question out there. I don't have anybody in the know to ask, but I really hope there's a level of military brass that is still loyal to the Constitution, that will have the backbone to stand up to Hegseth and Flynn and all those guys. And I don't know whether there is, but
Right.
that's the hope.
Right. We do believe in that the ethics
Yeah.
of
Well,
the
we
military.
thank General Milley for saying
Right.
Trump's a fascist. And all of these firings of vets, and we have the big vet protest tomorrow in DC. I think that's also sending a message to the military that this administration is fascist.
Right.
Right,
Deborah,
but
we want to hear from you. Sorry.
no, I just wanted to say for years and years, and I don't know whether it's still true, but my guess is yes. On every base in every place, they had Fox News playing
Mm-hmm.
24/7. So
Yeah, I remember 3 retired generals wrote an op-ed saying we need to take it off all military bases,
Yeah.
and they didn't.
right.
Mind control for sure.
It's propaganda.
It's
And
indoctrination.
right, before I get to Deborah, I have a question about the military parade. What in your mind, Stephen, does that play into what they want people to think or look like or fear?
Well, Trump loves dictators, and he's jealous that they get to have military parades. And I think we did a social media post with a Hitler military parade for his birthday to try to, put the two together. But it's just going to cost the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars for Trump's ego. So that's all I can say about that. I think in light of what's happening with Musk, though, and Trump, is extraordinarily important. And it seems like Putin has now said, I'm done with Trump.
So
That's how it appears
Unpack
to
that a little
me.
bit more for us
Yeah.
and get to Deborah.
okay,
Say that again?
we
If
want
you
you
can
to.
unpack that a little bit
Yeah.
more, and then we'll get to Deborah, because I think that's what we wanted to talk about before, and you got cut off. So
Well, there's information that when Elon Musk was hacking through Doge all of our private data, it was also going to Russia. It was going to an IP address in Russia. And seriously, Russian intelligence, they call it active measures because they don't have the military might. They've compensated by developing psychological warfare at very high levels and infiltrating our country, recruiting influencers, and they would use a technique where they would throw out 1,000 conspiracy theories and see what American would latch on to it, and then give bots and then monetize them to keep it going. So it was like, what works? And I can state categorically QAnon was a psyop. And I can state, according to experts who know forensic evaluations on Twitter, and I've interviewed that man, that Flynn was at the very beginning. He didn't start the QAnon thing. That was a goof on the Trump people by hackers and anonymous. But Flynn got involved with that, and Flynn was doing is called 4th generation psychological warfare. That was first written up by William Lind in the 80s, and I should add, Lind met with Trump in his first time in the White House. But Lind paired up with Paul Weyrich of the Christian right. And 4th generation psychological warfare aims to discredit experts, to discredit science, and to discredit democratic institutions. So, why are so many people questioning experts and science? Well, if you're a fossil fuel corporation or a country, you don't want people knowing that 98% of all climate scientists say we're killing our habitat. They want to keep the greed going. The creationists who say the world is 6,000 years, they don't want people educated that the planet's billions of years old. So there's this very deliberate breaking down of norms in order to install this this autocratic fascist mindset.
Yeah, here we are.
But what's different about America is a lot of us have immigrant backgrounds, have been educated, have grown up in freedom. Vladimir Putin grew up in the Soviet Union. He doesn't know that frame and that experience. And I'm counting on Americans' real identities just being like, no way. My father fought in World War II. Hell, if I'm going to let a fascist take over and let Russia take us over. And the messaging, in my opinion, needs to be against Russia and explaining brainwashing and mind control to the American public. We're not stupid, but the mind controllers act as if we're all stupid.
No, I get it. So I want to make sure Deborah.
Yeah, well, Stephanie wanted to say something. I
Yeah,
didn't.
then we'll go to Deborah because she's been waiting. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, I just wanted to say that there are attacks on higher education and science and medical expertise and credentialed people it's part of that whole continuum.
Yep.
And
RFK.
RFK, right? And then also the battle with Harvard. So I live in Lexington, Massachusetts. So
I'm in
everyone,
Northampton, by the way, now.
where are you?
I moved to Northampton from Newton, but I'm a Massachusetts too.
Awesome. So many people around here work at Harvard, went to Harvard, went to MIT. I mean, like you talk about coastal elite, the inner circle of Boston. But so we know that it's not this, shining beacon on a hill, but it's the employer of many people, and almost all of our teaching hospitals are Harvard hospitals. And so by having this fight, first of all, Harvard's one of the only ones who could fight against it, but that gets us at a whole bunch of different levels.
Yes.
And it's catastrophic.
Let's go to Deborah. Deborah, what's your question?
Yeah, my
Thank you,
question is that twice in my life I've been people have tried to recruit me, and I immediately knew what was happening, and I told them in no uncertain terms, get out of my face and leave me alone. Why is it that I knew and other people are more easily influenced?
I don't know. I can tell you that when I got recruited into the Moonies, no one had ever heard of the Moonies. In February of 74, Moon hit the media in the summer when the Moonies, including myself, was sent to D.C. to fast for Nixon during Watergate because God wants Nixon to be president. So, but the thing is that exposure to former members, reading articles, etc., helps.
I never did. You know what I think? My theory is because I was, I graduated high school in 1974, and it was around between 1974 and 1980 that this happened. But I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school. People might not like what I'm going to say, but I considered my Catholic school education being having been a brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
And it screwed my life up miserably until I figured it out. So I think that may have been the catalyst for me.
It's interesting because were you hit with a ruler when you were in school?
I was hit with a ruler. Yeah. But that
Corporal
was only
punishment, by the way, is a feature of right-wing extremists. We know that it traumatizes children's brains.
it just made me mad. It just made me mad.
But it made you sensitized that you don't want anybody telling you what to do like that. So there's an inoculation a bit. And I've seen this with people who've left the Soviet Union or China who are like, this reminds me of, well, and no way am I going to say yes to this.
Okay, good.
You're welcome.
Want to move on to Paul? You've got your hand up. Let's hear what your question.
Thanks. Thank you. First up, I grew up in Trumbull, Connecticut. So Bridgeport University was taken over by the Moonies many years ago. And they pumped a lot of money into it. They tried to turn it into some sort of peace institute or something. Never worked out. They finally had to get rid of it a few years ago. But fortunately for Bridgeport, they were able to stay out of bankruptcy and continue to have a university. Just worked out well for them, but not for the Moonies, thankfully.
Yeah, can I
But
just
as a
respond real fast and say I'm actually going to be on with the former mayor of Bridgeport Sunday at 10 a.m. on a radio show. And Bill Finch brought me to Bridgeport when they first bought the university to try to explain the Moonies and everything. But the Moonies were using that university to recruit people all over the world by giving them scholarships. And then they would come here and then they recruit them into the Moonies. Sorry to interrupt you.
I want to hear your radio show, so put the info about that on the chat if you would. I wanted to just raise one thing about language. We've all been using the term Christian nationalists for many years, and it's in organizations. We can use that to confront them. Isn't it time we use the word faux Christian, the term faux Christian, or even just ignore Christianity entirely, since they're not really Christians, in my humble opinion, even though I'm not Christian. I like you, I'm Jewish, but I think that it's fair to say that what they really want is to create a modern confederacy in this country. That's what they're looking to do right now. And maybe we can call them something else, but I've at least starting with faux Christian, just to make the case that they're not what they claim to be. And people are maybe confused and think that they are some sort of real Christian sect or some
I actually like
valid
that,
Christian
Paul. I'm
group.
going to use it with your permission.
Yeah, Paul,
It
he
gets
likes
us
Please
that
give me some
reframing.
credit. I'd like to get this out with you. We can
And
do
I
it
like
together.
this,
I call
Stephanie, what are your
pseudo
thoughts?
Christian, but or do it in air quotes Christian, because they
Yeah.
think that if you give a lot of money to their minister, they're going to go to heaven, and that's the opposite of Jesus's message.
It sounds
Yeah.
like Stephanie's wheelhouse too, with words and a not framing. What is your opinion on when we talk about Christian fascism, Christo-fascism, fascism?
Well, it's deeply intertwined also with white supremacy. And so I'm also not a Christian, so I look at it all and I have my opinions and I'm not going to share them here. So I don't know whether calling them faux Christians just gets to our base or whether it breaks through.
Yeah, good point.
Good point, yeah.
It's who you use it with, not people who are in it, in these groups, for sure.
Right. I don't think, if they're in it, no. So I always try to attach the white part because it's intertwined, to help people understand that it's deeply racist and it's deeply anti-Semitic and it's deeply anti-Islam. I mean, it's theocratic, but by just saying Christian nationalist, maybe people are thinking, oh, they're Christians and they're patriots. So what's bad about that?
Right.
Somebody on the chat said faux Christian, that phrase is incredibly insulting. I'd like to hear why that is, or have you guys discussed that perhaps?
That's interesting. Well, I want to make sure we have a couple hands up and get that. When I think of faux, I just got hungry. I'll just say that.
Well, I think of the Jewish tradition of the Midrash. We know that tradition is that wisdom is not owned by one person, it's owned by the community. And it's a process of discussion and exploration. And together we come up with the wisdom. No one owns that wisdom. And even Jesus preached that. So that, if you want to throw in some Judaism in there, you can say that, that Judaism teaches us that not one person owns the truth also. So
And even Abraham bargained with God and didn't agree with him and such. It's a different frame. Anyway, let's
different frame, but I think that goes to the call. Let's start making up our own terms because they excel at that method and we haven't done it very well.
Frida, what's your question?
Can I just hop in just for one thing? So I spoke, so it's on my Substack with a scholar who studies New Apostolic Reformation.
Is that
And so,
Andre Gagne or Fred
no,
Clarkson?
it was Matthew Taylor.
Oh, I've interviewed him too.
It was great. It was one of those days that like blew my mind into tiny pieces. And I also interviewed someone who studies the radicalization of young men online. And that's
big.
I'm totally missing his name. It's recent. So those might be helpful in understanding, what we're looking at here.
Matthew Taylor is a Christian scholar, and he has a documentary, etc. We need more Christians to speak up,
Right.
frankly, against the New Apostolic Reformation, etc. Better than Jews and other people who are humanists.
And then Michael Flynn with the Seven Mountain the churches stuff, that awakening toward it just all is very very scary what's going on there, how they're using religion. I want to make sure we get to Frida, then we have Denis, and just keep your question focused, please.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a question. I just also want to say the Episcopal Bishop of New York's been kicking ass. So if you haven't been following what he's been doing, I suggest checking that out as far as walking the Christian walk and talk. So when it comes to creating a safe space to ask questions, to build bridges across divides, I've been contemplating, well, I've actually actively working on creating these common sense coalition based on Thomas Paine's work to try and bring people, thank you, to bring people back to the basics, to say, hey, I'm tired about fighting about partisan Democrats, Republicans, whatever. What are we going to do? And to bring people together in communities across the divides to say, like, how are the farmers going to deal with the tariffs? How are we going to deal with the schools? How are we going to deal with our hospitals? And start getting people focused on the issues. Are those the type of questions? Is that going to be the things that bring people out of the fog and get them connecting with each other? Or do you have any advice or
good question, Frida.
Yeah.
I just say we need to focus more in real life. Human beings are embodied minds. We need hugs. We need to be with real people. We need to raise our kids not on screens, especially before the age of 3. It's now considered to be abuse from the neuroscientists who know developmental psychology. That children should not be on screens, even TV. They should be with people because their brains are learning from us. And we want to fight the transhumanism, the long-termism, the accelerationism, and the crypto. That's the ideology of Musk and Thiel and the tech bros. A plug for Greg Epstein's book, Tech Agnostic. If you haven't read it, I did a great interview with Greg about this book. It's all, and he says this big tech is the new world religion, and count me out. These ideologies are so off the planet that it's not helpful for survival. And I say we need to focus on planetary survival.
Right. And those of us with kids or teens, whatever, it is not easy. Even if I have a 17-year-old, he knows that he's addicted. He knows their parasocial relationships, but teens can't be in their own head anymore. Like they'll always have something to focus on. It's not easy, but it's really important.
It's not good. Right. Denis Atwood. How are you, Denis?
Good afternoon. Thank you. I missed a little bit about 110 because it was totally misled by Doppler radar and had to have an umbrella to help my wife get in a car to make a trip. So anyway, sorry for missing that part, but thanks for our 2 great guests. I put some statements in chat, so I won't revisit them here. What I really want to get at is what I had mentioned before. It is widely reported and echoed that young males, are more susceptible to cult and mind control, if you will, than the females. And if that is true, first of all, I want to find out from our expert. Okay, so that then obviates the rest of my question. If it's true, how can we work with that? So wonder why it is so falsely reported. I'll change it to that question.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
think males are being targeted because they're trying to recruit an army of true believers. And that I go back to Nazism and Hitler's recruitment of children and grooming and programming them. And the whole Me Too movement and women's rights movement, especially in the South, where there were very clear role models. Young boys need good role models for how how to see women as equals, and that's where we're missing some important things. But women are as susceptible as men, maybe more so, in the sense that women culturally are brought up to pay more attention to other people's feelings and their needs than men
Well, that was,
necessarily.
excuse me, to be the human connection you were advocating before instead of screens. If the females have more socialization with other humans, then so anyway,
Well, I think we need more young, beautiful women messaging
beautiful.
to the men who, and I mean it,
What,
Yeah, I
not
get
to insult
I know.
anybody, but attractive is the better word. Attractive, intelligent, a messaging to young men of, hey, it's a real turnoff when I hear men, talking like this. It's like,
Stephanie has any
you want to
different
date
view?
me, you should be like,
yeah. It worked for you. Is that what you're saving?
Well,
I
based on,
had one other question I wanted to break in though.
I would say based on my experience with this group for more than a year, these women are not susceptible. That's so I want to commend them
Dennis.
for that.
Thank
That's
you.
why I'm going to mute you. No, I'm
We use
just
our powers for good and not evil, Dennis.
Love you,
I
Dennis.
want to know, it was brought up earlier. We don't want to downplay the very real concerns that led these folks to be so disgruntled to begin with, right? When you talk about the young males, they have good reason to be kind of they have good reason to be pissed. They're underemployed, they're not able to buy houses, their things are not going their way. They, if we're a Prof G house here, if you ever listen to him. And this is a big campaign of his. So what do you say about not we want to challenge their thinking, but we also need to validate the very real concerns that made them so susceptible to begin with. What do you say about that?
I agree. I mean, it really sucks to be young now. I mean, I've had a great life. I've seen the best of America. And so I'm horrified. I have a 22-year-old son, and when he's looking forward to, with now we may go into a default in 8 weeks that the media is not talking about with this abominable bill and such. Putin wants us to go into default. He wants us to lose the dollar as the world's reserve currency. So it sucks for our young people, and I don't have an answer other than we have to think about what can we do within our power to just move the boulder a few more feet. And that's why I've been working so hard. I should have retired years ago.
Can we validate their criticisms without validating
Of course. But what I'm telling young people now is, with the advent of AI coming, it's like develop skills, like modules of skills. And one of the most important skills for young people is to learn how to public speak, like not just message and texts, but actually how to talk in person to an audience, to a group of people, and develop self-confidence around being able to message, but develop skills, including maybe woodworking or other, growing,
Right.
cooking food, things that I think are really central to the
Right.
human experience.
I want Fennell to speak, because Fennell, I think it reminded me when you talked about point to who rigged the system for 40 years. And right, like that's, or these young men said they're recruiting them now to be mad, but they're not mad at the right people.
Yeah, they're not mad at the right people. And I absolutely agree with saying that they have valid feelings about what has happened. but I think that this has been going on for a really long time. And I do think that we bear part of the responsibility in terms of how we've educated them and how we've taught them, and in some cases, how we've coddled them. Because what happens is what the administration has done, this regime, is othered everybody else. You don't have a job, you don't have the life you want because of all of these other people. They're the reasons why you don't have a job, so it's their fault. So I think that there is some accountability to be had. There's some responsibility to be had. I don't know how we get to the bottom of it, but part of it is communication in terms of the fact that we have to figure out how to out communicate them, even using the tools that they use. I say use bots and all these things that they use for evil. We have to find a way to use them for good, because it is the fact that we're being out communicated, and we just don't know our history, and we don't know when we've been, you know.
I want to call attention that we're at 1:33, and Steve, we want to be respectful of your time, and
You
Stephanie.
cannot leave. We're just not
I
done.
know we do operate usually till 1:45, but if you have to leave,
I can do it. This
2
is
more minutes.
fascinating and great, and I'm really grateful that you've introduced me to Stephanie Wilson,
Love it.
because I was not familiar with your work, frankly, and I've already signed up for your Substack.
Oh, thank you.
And,
Look at that. We
Will you
made
come on as a guest?
I have a podcast, so we'll swap. You'll
You
have
All
guys
me
right, that's
on.
great.
We
Have
are
you
the Love
on.
Connection show.
That's
Just-
right.
Yeah,
I want to
but
get
yeah, go
just
ahead.
to Belle. I'm going to, Todd, if you could wait a second, I want to make sure Belle gets in. She's on the team, and I want to make sure that we let her speak. Go ahead, Belle.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to point out, and as a Mexican who grew up Catholic and it's now an atheist, because that's what you do, that the whole thing with the Christofascism and the white supremacy has infiltrated also the church, the Latino churches, not only in the States, but also on Latin America. In the Catholic Church, there's the charismatics, and I remember that when I was growing up, and it started but it's very strong. And the evangelicals, with the non-Catholics, it's very strong here in the States, and it's very strong in all Latin America. And I think that it is because of colonialism and everybody wants to be white, but also because the Catholic Church and any church will want to latch onto anything in which they can get power. But just don't, when we're talking about white nationalism, it's not just in white churches, it's also in the Latino churches.
Thank
I'm
you.
very
Belle.
glad you said that, and that's why I'm translating Combating Cult Mind Control in my updated edition. It was in Spanish when it came out in 1988, but we're putting that out, and my bite model and influence continuum dissertation is in Spanish, because I totally agree with you. New Apostolic Reformation is a worldwide event, and the media is calling it popularism, and I think it's this infiltration and recruitment into these groups around the world. There's an estimated 900 million people in NAR around the world. I interviewed Elle Hardy, who wrote a great book on Pentecostalism, if you want to hear my interview with her about this, because Pentecostalism is a new invention in the early 1900s, by the way. A lot of people think it's been around since the time of Jesus, and it just isn't.
No.
It's an invention.
Well,
Sorry,
and
Stephanie,
as
go ahead.
you think about New Apostolic Reformation, also know that Mike Johnson is a part of that movement,
Yes.
and a lot of our leaders. And I also just want to go to the proximity to whiteness for Cubans. It's not proximity. They self-consider themselves white. A lot of Latin America from their European roots. So there's all sorts of racial hierarchies in different places too.
Thanks for that reminder. Another layer, they're right inside the government at the top, the top of this all. So Todd, your question, and keep it brief, please.
Just want to thank you for validating one of the concerns I've had for so long. Retired diplomat, years in China, came back and was part of Tertullians, which was retired military officers, intelligence officers, and foreign service officers together to say, we had CIA's Mike Moreau, we had a lot of Voice of America, all of them. Everyone was concerned about disinformation. This was before the 2016 election, but didn't think it would hit us. And you've explained how it did. Anyone wants to know about TikTok, of course, TikTok users are significantly more favorable in their attitude toward China than the general population. Why? Because they're tweaking them psychologically. I'm really identify with your concern about the big, beautiful bill. We have very little time to
the
make
abomination.
that toxic because it is the greatest betrayal. And it's, you know, bad that 10 million people could lose their Medicaid, but guess what? They're introducing it after the midterms, so they won't feel it. So people will think, like in a call, people think, oh, well, he was going to, but it didn't happen. So obviously it's not a problem.
And they added 10 years of no legislation for AI. Sorry to interrupt you, Todd.
There are so many, but the big thing that Katherine put her finger on, who has created this for 40 years, who's rigged the system? From 81, that's Ronald Reagan, from 81 to 2021, trickle down has moved 50 trillion from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. And what people don't know about the big, beautiful bill, the great betrayal, is that Trump is gutting the IRS and he actively promotes white collar crime. He's a cheater. So he's making US tax revenue is based on voluntary compliance.
Coke Corporation has been at this for 50 years, actually.
Exactly. So because of that voluntary compliance, we've had a pretty good tax system. As soon as that erodes, we get nothing. And he is literally pardoning tax cheats. So that is a message that's not getting out. So my question, I've got two questions for you.
One,
how do we take that? That's the real issue. The 10 million on Medicaid, that's terrible. But this is putting in concrete a system that a fundamentally system for 40 years that has been wrong, says we don't need revenues and has been way wrong. And plus rich people don't pay taxes. They don't have to pay taxes because they don't have income. They lend themselves money from their assets.
Todd,
So
you need to ask the
how
question,
do we
please.
get that into the mainstream media? How do we get your stuff into the mainstream media that this is all cult?
Yeah,
I saw my precinct captains lost. My ward bosses lost because Chinese elderly who used to be my ward bosses in getting it out to other people, and they got brainwashed after the 2020 election.
Those are all good questions, Todd.
And how do we get you on major media more?
Well, let me just say, this is a good question because Stephen, I remember you talked about Jamie Raskin, and why don't you just say how you tried to get the Democratic or somebody party to listen to? That's a great story.
Well, I met Jamie Raskin at a Democracy Summer event for training interns to help with elections, and we sat for 2.5 hours, and he said he read my 3 books and my doctoral dissertation. He was the one calling it the cult of Trump first in the Dems. And back in the day, I said we should have a congressional hearing on QAnon and conspiracy theories, and I could put a panel together. And his caucus would not go for it. And I have a signal chat with Jamie, but he just hasn't been able to do anything. And part of the problem is they're all overwhelmed. They're reacting. I say we need a 10 to 20 year strategy. We need to get brilliant people in a room and map out a proactive thing, not just a reactive thing, because people have been asleep. They have not been paying attention to what's actually happening.
Stephanie.
No, just saying yes. We totally need that.
Say something. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, we need a plan. We need to be, everything that the Democratic Party is doing right now is like short-sighted, in my opinion, short-sighted, and they're listening to this popularism where they want to talk about what people, they act as thermometers as opposed to thermostats. This is an announced statement where the Republicans think about where they want people to be and move them there. and the Democrats try to figure out where the people are and go there, and that isn't going to work long term.
Yeah, we need money and
Money.
influencers. We have pulled together a meeting in person with some of the top brilliant strategists, and we would map out. This is a complex systems issue, and it can be done from the bottom up, but we need specialized people with their expertise. And not right now, everybody is in silos.
That's a problem.
And even friends, people that I've interviewed and whatever, they're just too busy doing their thing to work together with me, and I'm frustrated, frankly.
And you have billionaires, like you said, the tech bros, that's come together in this really, really scary, powerfully thing, right? You have Russia, you have government, you have money, Peter Thiel, you have AI, you have, I mean, you couldn't write a story. You can write a book about it. It sounds like a thriller, but I want to make sure we get to Lauren, and we're going to wrap up with our usual wrap up. Lauren, keep it simple, keep it short. Go ahead.
Yeah, on November 4th, we have two women running against each other. Why don't you make Virginia a test of everything that you're thinking about over the next 4 to 5 months? And I'd like to get from you right now what you think you see as the election sets up between Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Sears.
For anybody, for us, or for the, I mean, we're on.
I don't
We're
know
our
who
two
they
experts.
are.
So
First, I thank them very much.
thank you.
Extraordinary presentation.
So we can address that later, because we can have a whole show about that. But we want to make sure we respect you guys' time, and we can send you on your way while we wrap up, or you can stay with us.
I just have
Fennell wrap. I'm going to hand it over to Fennell, and I'll be quiet, but thank you for being here.
Yes, I just wanted to say to Stephen and to Stephanie, this has been extraordinary. I thought that I had learned as much as I could learn reading the book, but listening to you has been extraordinary. Stephanie, I am so enamored with your podcast. I just don't know what to do with myself. I think I've found more answers there than I can find anywhere. And what I think is really interesting about this whole big mess that we find ourselves in, it was one of the podcasts that I listened to, Stephanie, and it was about people who had gone to a protest, and they were all upset because they didn't have any speakers. And the person said to that, we don't have any speakers, we don't have any messengers. And the person said, you guys, you're the messengers. And so what I think about this big mess that we find ourselves in, I think that each of us is going to have to commit to what more can we do. I know people were chatting and talking about Dr. Hassan's stuff when he was in there, but we're going to put the information in there that you need to get to both of the tools that he's put forth that you can use. We must do this work. We can't rely on Congress or anybody else. We're gonna have to figure out the pieces that we can do, and there are pieces that we can do in Virginia. So I feel more hopeful today than I felt in a really long time, and I want to thank you guys for the conversation and for that. And for everybody else on here, the quote that I'll send you away with today is, nothing can stop you when you have a strong mindset. And so these guys today have given us the tools that we need to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
And as we always say, it's up to, no one is coming to save us. It's up to us.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
as we say
Thank you.
goodbye, thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Stephen. Carrie, any last words? And I am trying to pull up our little song, but I want to remind.
Well,
that next
yeah, I
week-
mean, I was really
next
glad
week.
for now that you just said that about it's up to us. Like, it is time to stop looking for followers and start looking for leaders. We have to be those leaders. We can no longer be followers. And for all of us who grew up without the social media, okay, let's just put that aside for a second. For all of us who spent time at church, in synagogue, at the 4-H, in the civic leagues, at the PTA, all of that time we spent organizing in our local communities to make our lives better, make our lives for our children better. We're going to have to take all of those hours and dedicate it to this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'll be talking about at the Women's Summit in my workshop, is that all of those leadership skills that you may have picked up, or even maybe some of the joining skills you may have picked up in all the stuff we've done all of our lives, it is time to take all of that. There's 168 hours in the week. We got to start spending them on stuff like this, because it's not going to happen unless we do it. We just got to suck it up and get uncomfortable And as Dr. Hassan would have said, get uncomfortable with the silence. And as Stephanie would say, get uncomfortable, talking to people on their level, not in something comfortable for you. But yeah, we've got to save ourselves. It's up to us. We got to channel all those hours and do this instead.
How do you eat an elephant?
One piece
bite
at
at a time.
Oh, with ketchup.